Story 1. When they began arguing for the sake of it, there was no rhyme or reason or well-thought-out ideas. They just blindly disagreed with everything to anger me, and then they would say whatever when I refuted their weak arguments. Story 2. She talked me out of it. She was always so down on herself. Eventually, she convinced me. Story 3. One ex in particular was 100% responsible due to his disgusting, pushy sexual behavior. I felt very uncomfortable in the end. Story 4. She kissed me and it was very wet. Then she yelled at me for wiping it off. Don't cover me in saliva and I will not wipe it off. Story 5. Meeting someone who truly treats me well, realizing I was settling for less than the bare minimum. Story 6. He drank a six-pack almost every day because it helped him relax. Story 7. My ex emotionally dumped all her issues onto me. After a long time of being her personal therapist, I began to feel a duty to be there for her through all her emotional turmoil, to protect her and help her improve herself with advice and support. However, that dynamic skewed the relationship, and my sexual desire slowly diminished until it was gone completely. It was a harsh lesson to learn that you can be there for your partner, but even if you want to, you cannot be everything for them. Story 8. He realized that he treated me poorly and as a last priority. Story 9. We worked together, but we had not seen each other in a few days because she wanted a break to be closer to God. She came into work with a hickey on her neck. Turns out God's name is Kevin. Story 10. After my cat died, my ex suddenly grieved for his dogs that died more than 3 years earlier. So I needed to accept that he could not support me in my grief, and I had to give him sympathy instead. I realized he did not actually love or care for me, only the attention he received from me. Pictures of him now make my skin crawl. Story 11. Her lying and hiding was enough. She always talked about herself and never asked me anything or what was going on in my life. It was really hard to have a conversation or receive feedback. I felt like I was single and never got any feedback. I am in a much better place now. Story 12. His codependency, self-loathing, lying, and cheating affected him deeply. He could not make or keep friends his own age because of how socially awkward he was. At first, I felt bad, but then he would cry when I left to go to dinner with my girlfriends. One night, he showed up at the bar where my friends and I were. We were outside talking when a car pulled up, backed into a parking spot, and kept its lights on in our direction. After a few minutes, I realized it was him. I texted him asking, "Are you here?" The car lights turned off and he got out. He walked up to our table and said something like, "Oh, funny running into you here." He grabbed a beer and sat down at our table with his back facing us. We were all confused about why he was acting so strange. That behavior continued. He lied about the dumbest, most insignificant things and cheated on me with his coworkers. A girl I worked with tried to warn me about him, but my pride would not let me believe her. That was in 2020. I have been single since. Story 13. The way he made me feel like I was the mentally unstable one. Yes, I was burned out at one point, but I felt more like myself and much stronger after therapy and the right medication. Yet, I was never stable enough for him. He did not need to talk about his anger issues and difficult childhood. Story 14. Maybe not lose attraction, but lack of trust is huge. It is the biggest reason we are not together. If truth and honesty are the glue that keeps relationships healthy, then lies are acid. True love may be unconditional, but relationships are not. Story 15. I told her I loved her, and she recoiled. It is hard to love someone after that. Story 16. Her terrible idea about finances and lack of common sense in spending and investing. Story 17. Realizing how abusive she was both sexually and mentally took me until she ended our relationship to understand how awful she treated me and to recognize that I escaped a very bad situation. Story 18. He cheated 3 times. When we took a break, he also went and was unfaithful to someone else. Pretty much, he was not able to stay faithful. Story 19. He stopped showering and brushing his teeth to save time and play League of Legends. Story 20. Let me pay all the bills for 2 years. He seemed to think he was above menial jobs because he was making his art, but he completed nothing despite all that support. Clearly, he was not above being kept by his girlfriend despite my tears and pleading as I was drowning and working to burn out to keep both of us afloat. He also had a 6-month affair with a vulnerable 18-year-old during that time, but I only found out after I ended the relationship. He was entitled and weak. Story 21. He was so forceful and intense with any type of intimacy, not in an illegal way, that I started to dread it whenever he came near me. It is hard to build desire for someone who will not leave you alone. He could not just kiss me. He had to shove me into a wall and press his lips into mine like he would never see me again. In public, he insisted on having an arm around me, or if there were other men around, he was as intense with public displays of affection as one can be when it is one-sided, despite me telling him I was not into that. I could not get changed into pajamas after a long day of work without being practically charged at once my clothes came off. There was always a tug of war with my clothes. Story 22. 1. He said he did not know what he wanted, which I took to mean he was not sure he wanted me. 2. He talked about his ex twice in a reminiscing way without being asked. Story 23. When you found out he cheated on me and continued to lie about it. Story 24. When I found out my ex-husband cheated on me with his best friend's girlfriend, I immediately went from loving him to the point of my own destruction to someone who made my skin crawl, and I couldn't look at him. Story 25. Honestly, I have seen a lot of my stepmother, whom I loathe, and I always asked myself how I ended up in the same situation my father was in. I am happy I got out of that one. Story 26. She wanted to open the relationship. I would rather be single with no strings attached. Story 27. They appear not to make an effort for me. For example, not planning or wanting quality time together is probably the biggest issue, but also not taking care of themselves. Story 28. I was always attracted to him, but issues kept piling up, making me realize we had no long-term future and that I was wasting my time staying in a relationship with him. Story 29. Poor hygiene and inappropriate clothing. Seriously, he wore a sweaty beach t-shirt and Bermudas to the opera in winter. What? Story 30. He allowed his family to disrespect me and be unkind to me for years, to the point that I would feel anxious before any family gathering. Story 31. Pushy with sexual acts and constant self-deprecation got kind of old. Lost feelings and began to feel anxious in the same space as him. Total mood killer, to be honest. Story 32. I lost attraction when he stopped pretending to be nice and I saw who he truly was. A hateful person who takes pleasure in hurting others. Story 33. Not following through or being consistent in what they say they will do. Story 34. He was very cheap, a real penny pincher in a selfish way. Nor was he a saver. Just a petty, self-involved bump. He was funny, though. Story 35. She became addicted to large dildos from a company called Bad Dragon. At first, it was fun and added to our evening play. However, she kept buying larger ones to the point where the extra large ones, with a much larger diameter than a pop can and 3 to 4 times as long, would just disappear with no preparation or effort into either of her holes. It made me feel sad. Well, anyway, that's when I had to break it off with the original poster's mother. Story 36. Physical attraction never went away. But the emotional attraction, how much time do you have? Having your perspective constantly invalidated or argued is a great way to lose that type of attraction. Story 37. I had to break contact because I kept trying to make it go back to what it was. She just wanted to remain friends. It drove me crazy. Only when I did I slowly start to see how she neglected my needs for most of the relationship and that it was good that she broke up with me when she did. It allowed me to become angry at her and then move past the resentment. We have since rekindled contact somewhat. We see each other at festivals and similar events. It is nice to talk to her, but I do not find her attractive anymore. Story 38. Lies and lies of omission. I can deal with a lot and give a lot of space, freedom, and understanding as long as there is honesty and truth. I am no one's keeper. Do what you are going to do, but at least own it. Especially when you know lying about it is the thing that triggers my issues. Story 39. When he stares at every other woman's chest or melts into a smile when he receives foolish compliments, He appears to be the cheapest and most accessible man in that moment. I want to give him a handkerchief for his drool. And I say, I'm not with him, I'm seeing him for the first time. Story 40. When I seriously looked back at our relationship, I realized she never truly cared about me and always saw me as a wallet with a penis. Story 41. Drugs, and moreover, lying about being on drugs when it was obvious. Story 42. She told me she hated me once during a heated argument. Story 43. She had a very permissive and unaccountable way of looking at life. I believe that structure should be a fundamental part of building a strong relationship if you want to start a family. Inevitably, this would become a problem if we progressed further. I still care for her as a person very much. Story 44. Everything was all about her. I realized that one day at the mall. Story 45. When I realized they were a chronic people pleaser, 90% of what they told me was a lie just to get me to like them. The worst part is that it warped my understanding of what a relationship is and took a while to get over the feeling that someone isn't right for me because we have differing interests and likes. To this day, I have no idea who I dated for 4 years of my life. It was all make-believe. Story 46. The moment I realized that I was ignoring all the warning signs and perpetuating the myth that our relationship was constructive, meaningful, and not toxic. It is one thing to be deceived by your partner. It is another when you allow yourself to be deceived or are deceiving yourself. I understand now how people remain in abusive relationships. Low self-esteem, lack of self-empathy, fear of being alone, and the belief that the other person will stop being abusive if you show them enough love. It was a wake-up call when I finally raised my self-esteem and faced the reality of the situation. Story 47. Weird fetishes I did not enjoy. At the end, he said we never had to do them again, but by then I was thinking, why did you make me go through all that in the first place? Also, why did you continue to push them on me when you knew I wasn't on board? Someone who loves you will not make you do things you don't enjoy. Story 48. His inability to take accountability and constant gaslighting. Everything about him became so unpleasant. I used to look at him and feel very disappointed. Story 49. The gender reassignment was the final nail in the coffin. I support them in their transition, but I am not attracted to women in a sexual way at all. Story 50. Lack of sexual activity is not the be-all and end-all, but less than once a week can be frustrating when partners sleep in the same bed in a small apartment. Story 51. Sounds silly, but she was tired all the time. She worked 38 hours a week, and that was all she did. The rest of the time, she was just sleeping and lounging around the house. Story 52. Besides cheating, his changed behavior was like he was a completely different person overnight. Story 53. It wasn't that I lost attraction for her. I lost attraction for romantic relationships in general. I am ambitious when it comes to my career. When it comes to relationships, I am lazy. I like the intimacy and relaxing with a cool partner, but it always turns into more than that. It becomes doing many things to keep someone interested in me. It is exhausting. Story 54. She accused me of cheating on her. I loved her and never did. I have no idea where she got the idea, but after multiple accusations, I could not do it anymore. I probably would have married her, but it is what it is. Story 55. If you ever got pregnant, you would have to have an abortion or I would leave you. Paraphrased, but that is not something you say to someone you claim to love. It was like a light switch instantly turned off any feelings I ever had for him. Story 56. She was lazy, inconsiderate, and selfish. Probably one of the worst people I have dealt with as a significant other. She would complain that I worked too much and other things. She was actually living off her mother's social security check for her gas money and insurance. Story 57. She was very attractive and did not seem to put effort into intimacy. She constantly complained about being overweight, which was not true, and did not want to take any steps to improve her health. No therapy, no walking, no gym, nothing. To me, this was very unattractive. She was and still is absolutely stunning, and I wish things had ended differently. I still think about her every day, but her complaining wore me down over the years. Story 58. I'll be honest here. I was never attracted to him. I felt bad for his home life and he was nice at first. Story 59. When I realized my entire life would be easier, more joyful, and more peaceful without him. Story 60. They completely changed. He went from a super sweet guy who genuinely cared, always making sure I was okay and offering help if I needed anything. After a few months, his personality completely changed. He became aggressive and controlling, getting upset if I didn't reply. Immediately, I don't stick around with red flags, so I ended it as soon as he showed them. Of course, he was very aggressive about it and couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to be with someone as amazing and kind as him. If someone shows you their true colors, believe them. Story 61. I had a bit of an epiphany where I realized I was recruiting partners who I would easily anger or disappoint, sometimes both, in order to replay abusive childhood dynamics again and again. I had an intuitive sense for these people and felt an intense, drug-like attraction when I found just the right one. The day I gained an objective perspective on my brain running this program, all of my attraction to previous partners just evaporated. It was bittersweet. I was finally free from the cycle, but I also had to deal with the guilt of how I changed these unwitting people's lives by being with them when I shouldn't have been. It is not easy being human. Story 62. He got on the scale and it said 496. Tell me how that is not a turd away from 500 pounds. Story 63. The taste of other men's penises was a big turn-off. Story 64. Her inability to clean up after herself or her 2-year-old. Story 65. She was prescribed alprazolam and would black out drunk almost every night. Story 66. Drugs and lied about it and always was going to change but never did. Maybe she did now, but it is too little, too late. Story 67. The lack of communication really infuriated me. He went from being the most attractive man I have known to being a very unpleasant person. Story 68. Too many emojis and a period after every single thing he says. Story 69. He was unpleasant to me and always had an attitude problem. He never wanted to brush his teeth, so I smelled his breath every time he opened his mouth. He pressured me into having sex, even after I said no multiple times until I just gave in. The 1.5 years we have been separated has been the best time yet. Story 70. They stopped helping me and treating me kindly. Everything that needed to be done I did alone. Cleaning, cooking, all the daily domestic responsibilities, and they were often quick to snap for no apparent reason. Feeling taken for granted or that you do not matter takes attraction off the table. Story 71. Finding out he lied about being divorced and was still married to his ex-wife without even filing the paperwork. Story 72. Lack of support with our children and household duties. Story 73. He was a gamer who ignored me and stopped taking care of his personal hygiene. Story 74. The lying, never following through with their word, and the gaslighting when caught lying are absolutely exhausting. Story 75. She told me she agreed with the actions of my childhood abuser. It was like a light switch went off in my head, and I completely fell out of love with her. Forget her. Story 76. He had what I can only assume was a psychotic break. He was adamant he saw leprechauns in the woods near our home and saw that as a sign that the Irish hitchhiker he picked up was his soulmate and that he loved her. He then met up with our friends behind my back to brainstorm ideas on how to keep me in the marriage while still being with his newfound love. Story 77. The rapes I had to endure. The mental and financial abuse. The abuse towards our 2 sons. The alcoholism. Story 78. My ex and I had a lot of problems, but what made me personally check out was the blatant disrespect and verbal abuse. Our foundation was already shaky, and the things she would say and the way she started talking to me and treating me were hurtful. After months of being treated that way, I just started checking out and we began resenting each other. Story 79. Arguing and realizing what they actually liked, sexually speaking. Story 80. The alcoholism and the refusal to seek help are issues. She is also a narcissist and would abuse me. I am leaving her soon. Story 81. They fell down a social media hole. They became convinced that they had multiple personalities, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and a host of other mental issues. They then quit their job and refused to help parent, help clean, or do anything except vape weed, drink energy drinks, and stare at their phone. They ran up their credit cards and refused to stick to any sort of budget. I cut them off financially this summer and am in the middle of filing for divorce now. 12 years down the drain because of a harmful algorithm and an emotionally immature spouse. Story 82. She did not shower, only using dry shampoo to make her hair presentable for work and others. Not for me. She would not initiate sex and did not like the way I tried to initiate towards the end. I realized she was a very different person towards the end than at the beginning, which made me understand she only pretended to be a certain way to be with me and then stopped trying once she was with me. Story 83. Her anger was evident. She started out sweet and caring, but after several months, I became the outlet for her depression and sadness. I tried to encourage her to seek therapy, but she refused. Story 84. He was trying to manipulate me into believing a false story about using his belongings because they were misplaced. I stared at him in disbelief, realizing he was never going to change. I stayed a little longer to collect myself, but things only got worse in that short time. I was emotionally distant and he did not like that. He would berate me for hours, causing anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, leading to a physical fight in which he broke my nose. Story 85. I felt overwhelmed when we moved in together. It seemed like I was taking care of a lazy teenager who constantly demanded more from me and criticized me every day. Story 86. The constant lies eventually reveal that he is not truthful. Story 87. He was not a partner. He felt like a son and did not contribute. Story 88. After he told me their type was super skinny men while I am here a chubby Latino man. Story 89. Lack of common interests led to boredom and a complete loss of passion in the relationship. Story 90. He was a bodybuilder and from afar looked great, but when I really got to know him, he was very strange. He would analyze his veins in the mirror, take many pictures of himself, and flex his chest muscles back and forth. I was thinking, what have I gotten myself into? Story 91. He was telling me about how he had a coworker who woke up at 4 a.m. every morning to have coffee with his wife before she went to work. If he did a late shift, he would nap, get up, and sit with her while she had coffee, then go back to sleep. It was one of the few moments the man had with his wife. My ex thought it was stupid that the man did that. Like that couple, we had been working opposite schedules for a few years and rarely had time together. He was either at work or asleep when I was home. His insistence that the coffee thing was stupid let me know I was done with him. He was not very romantic or affectionate, then would complain that I never wanted to have sex with him, despite me explaining he put no effort into the relationship. He wouldn't even stay up an extra hour to have coffee with me in the morning. Story 92. No empathy on his part led to no connection and lost attraction. I only realized this after we broke up, though. I thought I was asexual at one point. Story 93. She was in college at the time, kept talking about this guy in her animation club, and I could feel her becoming more distant from me. I felt myself getting closer to the point where I was going to break up with her. She cheated on me before I could. I knew it was coming, but it still hurt. Story 94. When he told me how to spend my money while we had separate bank accounts. Oh yes, and when he was unfaithful to me. Story 95. She was very toxic and I got tired of it. We were also very young for the relationship, and I think that did not help either. Story 96. Cheating, lies, disrespect, apathy, swearing. Can anyone stop me? Story 97. He was a fool, quick to lose interest and attraction. Story 98. She would always state how good a person she was, how much her family loved her, how much she did not care what people thought, and how much she did things just for herself. That by itself was not terrible, but I noticed that she was trying to trick herself into believing those things were true. If her family was going to have a party and I could not make it, she would say I had to go because her family would think we were fighting or broken up if we did not go together. I would then question their love for her. If they loved her as much as she said, they would understand that I simply could not attend and stop spreading rumors. I also questioned her claim of not caring what anyone thought. I would try to tell her that as long as we were solid, who cared about what people on the outside said? But she really wanted to maintain a facade that we were the perfect couple. It became exhausting because I was trying to keep her by my side while also trying to impress her family for her. Story 99. He was unable to control his anger, had no ambition, and constantly complained that I had ambition and wanted to go out and do things. He wanted to sit at home and be angry. Story 100. His inability to make good decisions or think independently demonstrates an overall lack of accountability, even at 30 years old. He has lost the mature, responsible demeanor. Story 101. He had a secret, not-so-secret pill problem, poor hygiene, and was the funny guy. He aged quickly. Story 102. She decided to become an unemployed stay-at-home wife with no children, 8 years into our 10-year relationship and 5-year marriage. She was employed for a total of 9 months during the final 3.5 years before our divorce. This decision was never discussed or hinted at until that point, and I had no say in it, despite expressing my concerns. Although I earned enough income to support a very frugal life for two, she continued to spend beyond our means. Approximately $600 per month was likely spent on the Disney company alone, including park passes, merchandise, and other leisure activities. Owning a home would have been permanently out of reach. The divorce was amicable without lawyers because she accepted responsibility for her actions. She is now living in her parents' spare room, while I enjoy my new life with a beautiful, financially responsible, and ambitious girlfriend who came into my life during my divorce. Story 103. No romantic interest. She was cool to hang out with as a friend, but I did not feel desired. Sex felt like a transaction rather than something loving and passionate. Felt like I was with a friend with benefits at the end. Story 104. Being inconsistent and not improving after I addressed it once in a healthy, open way, and they promised to do better. All my relationships in my life are incredibly healthy, and I am secure-leaning, so I have zero tolerance for low effort. Story 105. He spoke to me like I was nothing while he was drunk. I do not like or love him. I am trying to finalize the divorce now. Story 106. When he hit me, threw my phone out of the third-floor window, and laughed. Story 107. The lack of work ethic and the number of excuses he gave for why he could not work were unacceptable. To me, there are no excuses. My family never stopped working, no matter the challenges, whether it was mental illness, being undocumented, or being in prison. No excuses. Story 108. I can only describe it as a weaponized fear of intimacy. They avoided intimacy not by communicating, but by being so unpleasant that even someone like me could not get past it. And other things. It was a strange experience because by the end, I would cringe at the idea of having sex with them, and I am normally a sexual person. Story 109. Selfishness, stress, lack of insight into myself, and focusing on her qualities instead of looking for flaws. Story 110. Realizing that I will always be second to her hobbies or even her friends. Story 111. In terms of their personality, I found out we were not compatible. For example, they wanted children and I did not. However, I still think all my former partners are physically attractive and not unintelligent or bad people. I have been very fortunate. Story 112. My last relationship was full of warmth and affection. I genuinely loved her more than anyone else. However, I could no longer manage her issues. Her family dynamic was broken, with a malignant narcissist mother making family interactions painful. She couldn't hold a job even after I secured one with the state. She was depressed, and when it wasn't depression, it was asthma, migraines, or other ailments, requiring ongoing treatment. Despite my efforts to accommodate her needs, it was never enough. I was working out but could have exercised more. My apartment was affordable and comfortable, yet it wasn't quite good enough for her to stay. I had to constantly navigate these challenges, and it became too burdensome. I still loved her the day I ended the relationship a year ago. She is getting married later this month. Story 113. When I had to borrow money from my parents to pay for electricity and groceries, because he emptied the bank account to repay a short-term loan that turned out to be for drugs. Story 114. I was in a 10-year-long abusive relationship. I had my claws grasped so tightly around that relationship in the end because I guess I felt like I spent so much time on him that I didn't want it to be a waste. And really, I did love him. I wanted so badly for him to be able to heal. I thought maybe the abuse would stop if he could just get the help he needed. I thought maybe he'd stop cheating if I could give him the attention he desperately wanted. I went from being abused by my parents to being abused by him, so I didn't really know any different. Many times I was convinced it was all my fault. My family and my husband were abusive. I was the common denominator. It must have been me. He actually left me. He decided his lesbian best friend he told me not to worry about all those years was his soulmate. He wanted to run away to Canada to be with her. We were stuck living in the same apartment for a while, and thankfully there was a guest room. I still loved him. I was crushed. Then I saw how he treated his supposed soulmate. It was exactly the same. He even threatened to kill her, going into detail about how he would do it. It snapped me out of all those years of brainwashing, and I saw him for what he was. A very small, angry, bitter man who was desperately obsessed with having the world love him. To this day, he still tries desperately to be famous on social media platforms. He was also desperately obsessed with feeling powerful over others. I am thankful that he left me and snapped me out of it. It is the greatest gift I have ever received. I don't tolerate anything from anyone anymore. Story 115. She stopped putting in effort and started arguing just to have some drama in her life. It turned out she also cheated. I became very tired of all that nonsense. Story 116. He cheated multiple times. The first time was a 3-month affair. The second and third were emotional affairs. I am sure there were more, but that is all the proof I found. Slowly, I started being less attracted to him. He was fine on the outside but had a cheating, lustful heart on the inside. Story 117. Besides the lying, constant mind games, narcissism, always feeling used, being ignored, and never cared for, I would say it was the cheating. I could never look at her the same way. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Story 118. I kept wanting to go to tourist and drinking spots while I was dealing with a terminally ill parent. Story 119. When he started lying to people about trivial things, it became a problem. For example, one day his mother asked us to bring some bananas before arriving at his home, but we completely forgot. He lied to her, saying the supermarket did not have bananas. Another time, he lied to his best friend about not being able to attend a dinner. Incidents like these began to accumulate, and I realized he was dishonest and had difficulty setting boundaries. Eventually, he ended up cheating and lying to me directly. Story 120. Wouldn't touch me unless he wanted sex and grabbed me on holiday. Story 121. I met my husband. To be fair, I was 16. From the moment I met him, I felt like I had known him for multiple lifetimes. I tried to keep it casual and just be friends for a while, and he told me how he felt. I broke up with my ex, and my husband and I started dating. When we made it official, his friend who had used him as a rebound showed up at his door begging for him. He told her no. If she wanted him, he would not have been her second choice for years. We have been married almost 15 years now. Story 122. All he ever did was complain about where he worked, where we lived, our friends, and me. He would get home from work and start complaining as soon as he walked in the door. At night, he would snore loudly and kick me all night. Getting a divorce was the best thing I ever did for myself. I am very happily married to someone else now. Story 123. The fact that she cares more about her social media attention than she cares about our children. I couldn't wait to take my beautiful children out of that nonsense. Story 124. One day, I looked back at all of our videos and selfies together and realized he was rolling his eyes or looking uncomfortable in most of them. He never took a photo of us together. It hit me that he really did not like me and I was just a placeholder. Story 125. When I realized I was not actually interested in her, I just liked the fact that she liked me a lot. The attention was nice at first, but I slowly came to realize we do not have much in common, and I did not really enjoy spending time with her. Story 126. Too many other people had access. I thought I was on my own private Wi-Fi, but it turned out to be a local public hotspot. Although she appeared attractive on the outside, She was absolutely unpleasant on the inside. Now all I see is the unpleasantness within. Story 127. He was weak, completely lacking courage. He allowed everyone to take advantage of him. Story 128. When she stopped going out of her way to try to be attractive. Story 129. Lacked emotional intelligence. He was a doctor on a mission to prove himself well-educated and intelligent, but he did not understand matters of the heart and mind. It was draining. Story 130. Always on the phone. I hated it. Normal is fine, but that was not normal. That was really disappointing and disrespectful. When I told her about it, she said she would take care of it but never did. So I broke up, sitting right next to her, by texting her. I just walked away, never looked back, and never felt bad or sorry. I really felt happy. Story 131. Without meaning to, I pricked her with a needle and she burst. Story 132. Lied about many things, was always in a bad mood, never cleaned, and was a picky eater who also refused to cook. Story 133. My ex was a paranoid schizophrenic who lied to me directly. She was a terrible person. Story 134. He was cruel and self-centered. He also had a desire to overcome being cruel and self-centered. Story 135. I ate a fun-sized Twix from the mixed candy basket that she told me I could take a treat from. This led to a full argument about how I was an inconsiderate man because it was the last Twix in a basket of different types of candy. I also apparently had too many Dr. Pepper sodas from the mini fridge she had stocked so that I, and I quote, wouldn't have to walk all the way to the kitchen to get a drink. I took the hint that she just didn't like me anymore, and I was walking on eggshells for the remaining 2 months of that relationship. Story 136. She cheated on her ex with a man whom she had kept on the back burner for a few years. I only discovered this after her countless stories about her ex. When some details did not add up, I confronted her about it, and after a long conversation, she admitted to being inappropriate with this man while still dating her ex. Her ex was a difficult person, but she could not fully admit that she had cheated on him with this man. This made me wonder if she was telling me the whole truth. Having been cheated on before, I viewed her as untrustworthy from that point on. Story 137. When she started sticking notes on everything in our home that belonged to her and then informed me she was moving and wanted the movers to know what to take, I no longer felt the same. Story 138. Being a dishonest narcissist, but I stayed for way too long trying to make it work. I learned my lesson the hard way and never again. Story 139. Drank and drove. It is a big deal even if you do not get caught. I suddenly saw all the ugliness they had inside. Story 140. Dishonest and lacking hobbies to support their poor personality. Story 141. Her attitude and jealousy. I know many women who keep their man on a short leash. Many men use a location tracking app on their phone. My ex wanted me to download the app, and I refused. I am a grown man who can solve problems independently. I understand if there is a disability, then yes, you should download the app. But to track an adult person, in my opinion, shows a lack of trust and insecurity in the relationship. Story 142. Realizing that they never truly cared about me, and all the times I said, "No, I can't, sorry. Why did you do that to me? Please, can we talk?" They never truly cared about how I felt, only about what they could get from me. They made me believe I was special to them, only to keep playing with my feelings and causing me to become paranoid and extremely anxious. You live and learn. Story 143. Example. I just never give up. The worst part is how they are emotionally immature, but that applies to everyone around me. Parents, siblings, and friends. It has been a revelation to realize this and to educate myself about it. I find little moments to appreciate the love. Life is not all happiness and riches. Do the work. Story 144. He never helped around the house or with the children. I worked full-time from home, was the breadwinner, and the moment I finished work, I continued working around the house. He took the children to daycare in the morning. I finished work and immediately left to pick them up. Then I cooked, cleaned, took care of the children, bathed them, and put them to bed. What did he do when he got home? He immediately went to the bathroom and used that as an excuse to be on his phone for over an hour while I did everything. He then had the audacity to say I was pretending to be too tired or having a headache and not wanting intimacy. At that point, I was parenting him the same as the children. Sorry, I cannot be attracted to someone I have to parent. Story 145. She was not putting in any effort and gave me no time or respect. It broke my heart to break up with her. Shortly after, I found out she was married. I have no idea if they were still together or separated, but she never told me. When I realized that, all my feelings were gone and were replaced with feelings of betrayal and disgust. She told me she loved me and that she had never been as happy with anyone else. I opened up to her and gave her my heart. I guess I am the fool who got used. Story 146. Found out she was sleeping with multiple people right after we ended a decade-long relationship. Story 147. It eventually got to the point where I was just supportive of him, and it was not reciprocated. I was the one driving to his place, planning dates, and going to family parties. On my end, there was nothing in return, and I just lived too far. My car got robbed during the relationship, so I would ask for rides and even took a lift because my place was too far to pick me up, and his truck was not registered. I can keep going. Anyway, he ended up crossing a physical boundary. I let him know it was not okay, and he got so angry he did not work that day. That was the end for me. Story 148. I like big women and always have. However, one woman was too large, making sex uncomfortable in almost any position except doggy style. This was over 20 years ago when I was young and inexperienced, so I ended the relationship instead of discussing it with her. Another woman did not understand proper hygiene. She could not clean herself properly, and I talked to her about it. She did not think there was a problem. I told her, "Go wipe and you will see." She did, got upset, and we stopped seeing each other. Unfortunately, the unpleasant odor affected my interest. Story 149. I realized they took all my good energy and never gave me space to recover it. When I asked for space occasionally, they would get angry and offended. Exhausting. Goodbye. Story 150. He started yelling at me, ridiculed and mocked me, did not want to spend time with me, and withheld physical affection, not even wanting sex. He became a completely different person. I went from loving him to hating him. Needless to say, I moved out and broke up with him. Story 151. The way his mother treated me and knowing that it was not going to change. He and his family were very close, and he did tell his mother off when she crossed the line, but nothing changed. She continued to treat me poorly, and I could not imagine having her as a mother-in-law. Story 152. His constant jealousy and inability to make me feel safe and protected were troubling. I saw that he valued childish games, but I wanted something much more mature. Story 153. Lack of respect. When she decided that what her friends said or thought of my actions was more important than my feelings on a matter. When I expressed an issue, everything became a competition of, "That's nothing, I did worse." Story 154. When she pronounced Thailand as Thailand, she proceeded to argue with me over the pronunciation because it starts with K. Finally, when I made her listen to Google pronounce it, she stated that this is how she likes to say it. Story 155. They were an always right person. Had to win every argument even when wrong. Everything is either winning or losing. Also, they punched me in the face. So yeah, those two things really made me run and hide. Story 156. When I realized she wasn't worth a long-distance relationship, I also became pretty sure she was cheating on me, which is not very honorable. Story 157. Need for male validation. She often said that girls were too much drama and had many questionable dynamics with her friends. Story 158. He became distant, was angry that I beat him in a chair test, cheated on me, and left me for the other girl. Story 159. Eventually, it reached a point where I could not deny their manipulation and lack of character and morals. Story 160. He was really into those books and podcasts about self-help that were full of unscientific content. I support empowerment and doing things in a way that makes sense to you, but the lengths he would go to avoid doing any actual work on himself were surprising. He obsessed over drinking enough water each day but ate unhealthy food. He read pseudopsychology books about mental health but never saw a therapist, despite having clear issues that greatly affected his life. I don't know if I noticed it one day or if it was always obvious, but he simply was not a critical thinker, and it was unattractive. Story 161. We had an argument and he told me he took a bunch of pills. He knew my best friend died that way. I was nowhere near him at the time, so I asked one of his friends to do a wellness check. He messaged me shortly after, saying, "You told my friend? You don't even care about me." We broke up. I ended the conversation and blocked him after that. Story 162. When he would not stop calling me every hour and picking fights just because he wanted to, his narcissistic personality, his constant desire to spend my money instead of his, and his materialistic desires. Story 163. She stopped caring about her appearance. She dressed like a slob, didn't clean her car, wore her hair in a ponytail, only wore workout clothes and flip-flops, and stopped picking up after herself. I remember attending one of her work functions wearing a nice dress shirt, slacks, and dress shoes. She showed up with her hair in a ponytail, a wrinkled t-shirt, yoga pants, and slides. She blamed it on stress, but that was not true. Everyone gets stressed. Clean your car when you get gas. Pick up after yourself. Wear real shoes and pants and run a brush through your hair. She didn't care about herself anymore, let alone the relationship. Story 164. She made it clear that spending time with me was very low on her list of priorities. I am not referring to not spending time together daily. I mean, we would spend maybe 4 hours together a week, and that was usually for intimacy. Story 165. His treatment of our house as a hotel and me as the maid, handywoman, cook, everything, and parent, despite me working full-time as well. Story 166. He was a failure. He quit his job and refused to work, lived at home on unemployment, and spent all day sleeping and playing video games. He wanted sex, and when I said no, he would pretend to sulk like a child. It was embarrassing. Story 167. When everything I did was met with either disinterest, disagreement, or criticism, I would share exciting news, and her expression would not change. I would talk about fun outings or activities, and her first response was to berate me for how I spent my money. Would talk about my feelings, good or bad, and she would compare them with her own. I started feeling like I was talking with one of my parents, given the way she was acting. Everything I did or said was wrong to her. I am so glad I am out because that absolutely drained me. Story 168. They were a narcissist. They had surgery but instead went out to the bar for days. They have been out for about a year and found the best man. He gets better. Story 169. He was severely confused. His positions on issues swayed and were unclear, yet he was strongly opinionated at the same time. It was difficult to connect with him emotionally or mentally. Story 170. When I was advised to go to the hospital for possible seizures or a stroke, he tried to talk me out of it because he did not want to spend his night in the emergency room. Story 171. She lied, or at least changed her mind and could not tell me. When we began dating, I was fairly upfront about a desire to adopt or have children. She said she was open to adoption. 6 months in, I heard her talking to her father, and she was not interested at all in adoption. I did not get a chance to talk to her about it because she left after deciding we were not compatible. Story 172. She argued with me for half an hour that I was homosexual. Spoiler, I am not. She told me she was only with me for my appearance and the sexual relationship. Story 173. I had nothing outside of my interests, hobbies, and friends. I liked her, but it was suffocating. The guilt I felt if I did something for myself was too much. Story 174. She had no accountability, nor did she share household chores. I was broke and unable to contribute financially when I met her, so I was fine taking care of everything. But as I became more successful, I still took care of everything. I'm not even that clean, nor do I expect much, but her timeline for getting basic tasks done was weeks. I had many discussions about these issues, but she never followed through. It ultimately resulted in her saying if it bothered me, I should take care of it myself, which I did. It was difficult because she helped me out of a really low point in my life for several years. I felt greatly in debt and stayed for a few more years without any sign of change, only to be told I was nagging and negative. I tried picking up the slack without saying a word for weeks at a time, but still nothing changed. In hindsight, I probably should have documented the imbalance of effort. She was super sweet and loving but made my life harder. So I ended it. Story 175. When I started to feel like her father instead of her husband. Story 176. He borrowed money, said he would pay me back in 30 days, did not pay me back, and claimed I did not care about him because I asked for my money back. He then said he made a lot of money in his business over a weekend, still did not pay me back, then proceeded to make one payment. I had a household emergency and he scolded me for not picking the right contractor, but the one he thought I should pick needed more money. He still would not pay me back, so I had to go with the cheaper option, which was fine. He then came over and complained that I was taking too long to have my drywall repaired, which was because I had no money, and I was over it. I still do not have the remainder from him. He occasionally texts me that he loves me, but I have no time for that, and I reply with, "Where's my money?" This is met with, "You do not care about me." He is not wrong. I do, however, care about my money, which I loaned him when his business was in need. Now he has no business, and I can never see him again because I am too upset. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.